These days, with the vast amount of content being released, our lists get longer and longer. And with the fantasy drama His Dark Materials, I had that on my list for quite some time until very recently, as I've now binge watched the entire show, including the last season. In the first season, we get introduced to our main character Lyra, as we follow her on a quest to find her missing friend Roger. Along the way, we meet many different characters, including the Egyptians, an aeronaut called Lee Scoresby, and even bloody polar bears. The story also takes place in multiple worlds, so for example in Lyra's world, human souls manifest as animal companions, and also the world is run by a religious body called the Magisterium. And the investigation into a mysterious substance called dust by Lord Asriel causes conflict between the Magisterium and Lord Asriel, so we have that religion versus science aspect in the show. And in that first season, I was really glued to the mysteries of the show because we had Lyra and the Egyptians trying to find the missing kids, but then we also had Mrs. Coulter and like what she was all about with the Magisterium, and also Lord Asriel, what his experiments are going to lead to in terms of the dust and the connection between the worlds. And there was plenty of things about it which reminded me of other fantasy projects like Harry Potter or Narnia. I mean, even the demons remind me of Pokemon. And when we got to the moment where Lyra uses the alethiometer for the first time, I thought to myself, is this a bit like that Golden Compass film from a few years back? So I looked it up and it is based off that same story, but I've never watched the film before, so is it worth watching? Let me know. With season 2, it was an episode shorter than the first season, and it had its moments in terms of Lyra and Will building their bond, seeing how the knife works, and also learning a bit more about dust. But overall, it was a drop down in quality, and it did feel quite constrained compared to that first season. And so to the third and final season where everything comes to a head, does it succeed? A little bit. It does begin quite slowly as Lyra is in bed for the first couple of episodes as she's been taken care of by Marissa Coulter. But it was pleasant to see Marissa's love for her daughter on show here, because with Lyra, her father's got tunnel vision and couldn't care less about her, and with her mother, she's done some evil things, but that love's always been in there. And Marissa has definitely been one of the best characters in the show, and a lot of that comes from a great performance by Ruth Wilson, who, no disrespect to Gal Gadot, but if anyone's going to be playing an evil queen in Snow White, it really should be her. James McAvoy, who was absent for the majority of season 2 as Lord Asriel, returns here for the final season with a bigger role, as you might expect. And he's a character where you can't fault his determination towards his mission, while at the same time being left frustrated that he's blind to the bigger picture. And so the scene where Uruk tells him that Lyra's in the land of the dead really does stand out because he finally realises her importance, but as a father, he should have known that a long time ago. So as we just mentioned, Lyra goes to the land of the dead to try and find Roger because he's been calling out to her in her dreams. And she's able to do that because she gets saved by Will as well as Agent Salamakia, who's like this insect dragonfly sort of person. It then all kicks off as Will's knife gets broken by Marissa, she then gets knocked out by Agent Salamakia, and then she gets found by Lord Asriel and taken away with him. And whilst captured, she has some good back and forth with Asriel, and it's always interesting when we have like a 1v1 situation with characters to see how the demons react as well. Speaking of demons, when Lyra and Will take the boat to the land of the dead, Lyra has to leave behind Pan, and it's quite a sad scene, but at the same time I was thinking they didn't really do enough here for me to believe that Lyra would pick Roger over Pan. I get the whole guilt thing with Roger, but it just felt like that we need a bit more time there, or a bit more development in the story for that to really become a bit more believable. But that is the thing with His Dark Materials, it did need a lot more time. Even the executive producers said that they wanted to do 9 seasons and we've only got 3. So you can understand why some parts will feel very rushed and some characters will just feel like they're sort of there because they're in the books and here they are just to make an appearance. They've done a movie, they've done a TV show now, so maybe the next thing they'll do is an animation if they haven't already, because at least with animation they can really show those extravagant worlds and all these creatures much more easier than they can with a film or TV show. Anyway, back to the show. When they arrive at the land of the dead, I thought this whole sequence was really interesting because I just enjoyed the sort of discussion on the afterlife. So to have these people here stuck in that sort of limbo, I found fascinating, and to see Roger there and also good old Lee Scoresby. Now, I didn't hate Lee Scoresby as a character, he does bring some needed energy to the show, I feel, but at the same time, Lin-Manuel Miranda really overacts his character and really does feel like he's determined to make this character his own, but it comes across as very desperate as well. Having said all that though, Lee Scoresby as a character is very likeable because he's one of the very few people who has Lyra's back at all times. Dr. Malone is another character in that group as we see her walk and walk and walk. That is until she comes across the Mulefa and crafts the Amber Spyglass. And she's a very easy character to like because, she's being thrown into this just like us, the viewer. So she's learning it as she goes, but also at the same time, she's very nice with everything she does. Something that isn't nice though is a bomb. After escaping from Lord Asriel, Marissa returns to the Magisterium to find out they're building a bomb to target Lyra with. And they're able to do this by using a lock of Lyra's hair, which eventually Marissa does burn, but that bloody wet white McPhail has got a bit of backup. But he doesn't last too much longer, as when he thinks he's finally in charge of the situation, Metatron, the regent of the Authority, arrives and off he goes. Now this is the first time I've mentioned any of the Angels, and with the Angels they're characters which I'm really interested in terms of how much development they actually get in the books compared to the show, because in the show it feels like it's very minimal, and especially when we have Angels on two different sides as well, I feel like actually reading the books here could be really beneficial. And the same can be said for the Witches, because apart from Seraphina, I didn't really give a monkeys about any of the other ones. One of them actually died and I can't even remember their name. Anyway, Metatron sends a message to the mortals and the bomb does hit near Lyra, but she turns out alright.
Just a flesh wound.
As we move into the final couple of episodes, we see Lord Asriel lead the fight against the Authority. Marissa also joins in to destroy some oncoming spectres, and that ability of hers could definitely use some more time and some more explanation because it wasn't overly clear. The takedown of Metatron into the abyss by Marissa and Asriel, sacrificing himself for Lyra, I thought was really well done, especially with the involvement of the demons there as well, because especially the golden monkey, because how the monkey was fading away and Lyra was looking into it, it was a very sad scene but also a very satisfying scene. In the final episode we do see the fulfillment of the prophecy as Will and Lyra enter the Botanic Garden and find Dr. Malone. As for Dark Matter told her in season 2, she plays the role of the serpent and she tells Lyra and Will about the temptation of love. They do eventually kiss and the flow of dust slows down, healing all the worlds. Also Gomez, who wasn't a great character, let's be honest, tries to ruin the day, but him and Balthamos take each other out. Pan, who's been hanging out with Will's cat demon, eventually does make up with Lyra. But it's not the happiest of endings overall, as Will and Lyra can't live in the same world together, so they go back to their own worlds and agree to meet on the same day, same time, same spot, every year for the rest of their lives. It was a sad scene seeing Will say goodbye to Lyra between worlds. I never really believed they had that romantic chemistry, but as best friends that was definitely there. There is some text shown before the credits which tells us what happened to Lyra and Will, and also that Lyra and Pan had another great adventure apparently, so we'll wait and see about that one.
I think I'm quite ready for another adventure.
Daphne Keane is a star as Lyra. She showed as a young actor she could do it in Logan, and now she's moving on to Star Wars as well with The Acolyte, so she's got a bright future ahead. Also, I can't end the video without talking about the music. There's some great music in this show, especially the opening theme. Despite the fact it was definitely rushed, His Dark Materials was an enjoyable and thought-provoking show which wasn't amazing, but it wasn't awful. It was a solid mid-tier program. And whether you enjoy the show or not, I think there's enough jam-packed in here where you'll be encouraged to read the books yourself if you haven't already. I know I've not mentioned all the characters and I've glossed over some things as well, so if you want to have a conversation about them, feel free to do so in the comments. And if you fancy a video of me talking about blue people, then on screen right now is our review for Avatar: The Way of Water.